I am joined by my partner in presentation, Renee Dismuke from the Community Action Association of Alabama. Let's go to the next slide. Renee is also a CCAP commissioner. So I am thrilled to be able to do this with you, Renee. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Denise. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Well, and you and I were chatting as we prepared for today's webinar, and we have quite the registration numbers for today's session, which is fantastic. We looked back. We don't know the last time the partnership has hosted a webinar specifically on the Community Action Code of Ethics. And so hopefully the registration numbers tell us we may want to do this a bit more often. So we're excited to kind of walk through these today to talk a bit more about each individual code of ethic. We want to talk about how the Code of Ethics applies to community action practice, both at the local, state, and national levels. And we want to talk a little bit about the CCAP program, because certainly the Code of Ethics feed into becoming a certified community action professional. So let's go to the next slide. We like to start all of our sessions, and I think the Code of Ethics especially starts with the community action promise. So we won't ask everyone to read it out loud, but I'll read it and say it in your heads. But community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. Doesn't that get you going in the morning? It gets me going. That is the true value of what we do in community action. This is the promise we make to our country, to the families we serve, to our agencies every day. Let's go to the next slide, please. And so as we think about the Code of Ethics and what does it mean in community action to have a code, right? What does it mean to have a set of ethical statements that we strive to live within, to embed in ourselves? I think it really applies directly to our vision as a network, that we envision a nation that creates opportunities for all people to thrive, build strong, resilient communities, and ensures a more equitable society. Renee, when you think about this vision statement, what does it mean to you at the association in Alabama, as well as your work on the CCAP Commission? What does this mean to you?
I think, Denise, this statement is so profound. It's really the foundation on which community action is built. And it lays that foundation for the very important work that we do in our communities, in the state of Alabama, and across the nation. It talks to how resilient we are as an organization, as a nation, and it talks to building that equitable society that the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964 created.
Great, thank you. Let's go to the next slide and talk a little bit about the community action values. And again, a code of ethics is what you live by what you work by. And so I believe those tie directly to the value statements we hold dear in community action, especially if we look at number 1 here. We believe that all people should be treated with dignity and respect. And we recognize that structural race, gender, and other inequities remain barriers that must be addressed. And the second one, that we believe that this nation has the capacity and moral obligation to ensure that no one is forced to endure the hardships of poverty. And when we look at the Code of Ethics, you'll see a number of them talk about putting the issues and interests of families who are struggling ahead of our own. It's that moral obligation component for me that resonates when I when I lay the Code of Ethics next to our value statements. Renee, is there anything you'd want to add to that?
I totally agree, Denise. And we think about our mission, how we serve the poor. We think about the vision and values that community action embodies. And it's that spirit of helping people, serving people, that I think drives our value statements and the ethical standards that we're going to talk about today.
Great. Thank you. Let's go to the next slide. And I know that Madison mentioned that you can use the chat window on the right-hand side of your screen. I want to give you a little bit of practice. Again, if you say in the chat window to everyone or two presenters and hosts, we'll get to see your responses. But if you could put in there one word that you think about when you think about community action, let's see what your responses look like. If you can use the chat feature, that would be great. It would be wonderful to see where you're landing. I'm seeing hope, support, great, compassion. Yeah.
Help.
Mm-hmm. More on the support. Great. Courage. Ooh, I like that one.
Mm-hmm. Empowering.
Yeah, good. We'll have to start incorporating some word cloud technology into our graphics here so we could try to share this with folks. Equity, empathy. Justice. Mm-hmm.
People, understanding, support, caring.
Great.
Unity, I like that one.
Yep.
Encouragement.
I think these all really resonate. Let's go to the next slide. Unselfishness and opportunity. So the code of ethics, Renee did a little bit of history digging a little bit with Charles McCann, CCAP emeritus, and learned a bit about the work that went into developing the code of ethics. And the folks back in the early to mid 90s who developed the code of ethics felt it was important to have what they were calling a preamble statement. It comes from the Economic Opportunity Act type of frame that from 1964 and here 56 years, soon to be 57 years into the future, still resonates with us. So we as community action professionals dedicate ourselves to eliminating poverty in the midst of plenty. Does that framing sound familiar? Poverty in the midst of plenty? You remember President Johnson's State of the Union address? The paradox of poverty in the midst of plenty. In this nation, by opening to everyone the opportunity, and I think we saw that word over in the right hand in the chat room there for a moment when people were talking about what community action means to them. Opening to everyone the opportunity for education and training, the opportunity for work, and the opportunity to live in decency and dignity. And with respect for cultural diversity, we commit ourselves to, and we're going to talk about each of the individual codes, ethical statements in the Code of Ethics. So let's go to the first one. And we've put in a few graphics and things like that. So a lot of the pictures and graphics here are all usable by community action agencies. They're all pretty much available up on our website somewhere. So if you find something here that kind of gets your attention and you want to use in your own local agency, please feel free to do that. And we'll make sure this PowerPoint presentation is also available to you to use with staff, with your board, and with volunteers. But the number one code of ethics recognize that the chief function of the community action movement at all times is to serve the best interest of the poor, thereby serving the best interests of all people. That if we can make America work for everyone, especially those who are struggling, America will work for everybody, that we will all succeed. It's those universal, I think of sidewalk cutouts, right? Where there are cutouts made with ramps to allow folks who are using wheelchairs to traverse more easily across streets. But once they were developed and put into place and mandated in municipalities, parents with strollers, people who may not be in a wheelchair but may have challenges with steps. In bad weather and other times, sometimes a ramp is easier to navigate for everyone than perhaps a stair might be. So here, for me, this means that if we can work to make sure that all families have the capacity to live in dignity, our entire country will be better off. I don't know, Renee, if something here jumps out at you in this particular one.
I share some of those same sentiments, Denise. And And I like that it says to serve the best interest of the poor, thereby serving the best interest of all people. So I think that's the challenge for us today. Sometimes we forget what the real meaning is. And I think if we reflect on this ethic, this particular one, I think it puts it all in perspective of what we are challenged to do every day. And I might add, as we think about the code of ethics, we're going through these one by one, but all of these standards carry the same weight. So one does not mean any more than the other. They are all standards by which we should govern ourselves. And this happens to be the first one, but I think it sets the tone for all the others that follow.
Great. I agree. I think it definitely sets the tone for everything that comes after it. Thank you. So let's go to the next slide. For me, this one really resonates as well, that we accept as a personal duty the responsibility to keep up to date on emerging issues and to conduct ourselves with professional competence, fairness, impartiality, efficiency, and effectiveness. I was lucky enough, my parents exposed me to reading the newspaper at a very early age. Now, they started me off reading the funny pages, but I feel blessed that I have been interested in public affairs for my adult life. And that this code of ethic here says that we have a duty to keep up to date on emerging issues, I think really is an important one. We talk about leadership development at the partnership a lot, and one of those pieces is keeping up to speed on current affairs. And I just included some of the graphics of organizations that I try to stay abreast of and would encourage you to think about connecting with, whether it's independent sector, the American Public Human Services Association. I still get a newspaper delivered to my door. If you don't get a newspaper delivered to your door, I hope that you read online newspapers. Certainly the Post and New York Times have a wide swath, but local newspapers matter as well. Prosperity Now, the Othering and Belonging Institute. Black Lives Matter is currently, is certainly a core issue that we want to make sure community action professionals are staying abreast of issues, concerns, research. I will say for our winter conference, we've confirmed Dr. Imbram Kendi and Dr. Gail Christopher, who will be having a dialogue on how to be, Dr. Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, and Stamped from the Beginning. So I encourage you to keep an eye on current affairs, news, and not everybody gets driven by that stuff. I understand it, but I know we just passed an election and they need to be civically engaged. That's not just every 4 years. Community action professionals who are living by the code of ethics are going to be engaged. You're going to vote. You're going to pay attention to that sphere of influence from my perspective. Renee, what would you add to that?
Well, I would just also emphasize the fact that we need to be engaged. We need to keep current on emerging issues. And I'd just like to throw out a couple of questions to our audience. You talked about the publications that you read, Denise. So what are some of the websites that you visit each day? Any of the links related to poverty, to serving others? Do you daily think about those issues that affect the poor? So as we think about fairness and impartiality and efficiency, all of those issues relate to the personal duty that we have to stay abreast of what's going on in our communities and across the nation.
Yeah, I would encourage folks to share websites that they are utilize it on a regular basis into the chat window. We'd love to see where people are getting their information from. And I put the little Twitter bird on there because I have loved Twitter for at least 10 years. I was an early adopter because I can stay abreast of current news, current information in short bite-sized chunks. It's a blend of comedy that I follow, but also a lot of news folks to stay abreast of those issues. So,
And just one other thing, if I may. So we're looking at the news media, we're looking at the social media platforms. Are you also listening to the poor? Are you listening to those people directly whom we serve? I think uh, emergent issues result from those conversations. And I think it's important that we have those.
great point. I see someone in the chat says they read talkpoverty.org. Great website to frequent. Getting the spotlight on poverty e-news delivered to your door. There's a lot of great stuff. NPR, always good.
Yes.
Deep dive, right? Reddit and Facebook. Oh, NCAF, yeah.
Yes.
Reading David's briefs cover to cover, right? Let's go to the next slide. So the third piece of the Code of Ethics, respect the structure and responsibilities of the board of directors. Provide them facts and advice as a basis for their making policy decisions, and uphold and implement policies adopted by the board of directors. This goes for nonprofit CAPs and public CAPs. If you're a nonprofit, you have a governing board, right, that has the tripartite structure, 1/3 folks who are democratically selected from the low-income community, 1/3 who are elected officials, and 1/3 from the private sector. And having worked with boards and having been on boards, it can be a challenge to make sure that we're providing good communication and that we're taking the advice and direction from the board and putting it into practice. As staff, because we just keep running and running and running. But this code, part of the Code of Ethics, tells us that we need to respect those responsibilities of the board members. Maximum feasible participation. Where we find that concept today is through our tripartite board, amongst other places, but that board structure is one of our key places. So as community action professionals, if our board is setting the vision, mission, and direction of our organization, we need to follow that and support that and give them good information. It can be a challenge because if we're coming to work for an organization, we have the vested interest. We do. But it's the board that sets the direction. I don't know, Renee, if you'd add something to that.
Yes. So I wonder if all of us really know what the roles and responsibilities of the board members are. I think it's important for agencies to periodically review those roles and responsibilities and the differences or either the relationship between the executive director and the board. Oftentimes the challenges come when those relationships or those duties conflict. So I think it's important that training is done to make sure that everyone is aware of those roles and can keep those distinct duties separate. Also, how do you engage with your board? Are there written guidelines for the board to follow? Does your leadership team know about those rules? What happens when you personally disagree with your board members? I mean, you still have a board, you still have that governing body. So just realizing that it won't always be a rosy or a smooth sailing relationship. But when you understand those differences, the roles and responsibilities, the governance part, I think that helps to carry out your duties in the agencies with ease.
Agreed. Let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Renee.
Thank you, Denise. Keep the community informed about issues affecting the poor. Facilitate communication by the poor with locally elected public officials and the private sector. So this ethic to me means that we have got to be engaged in community affairs. It is your duty to advocate for the poor. And this means as a servant leader, you are the voice for the voiceless. Our Community Action Network expects our leaders to facilitate communications about the needs of the poor. As far as poverty and the poor are concerned, I think community action should always be at the forefront. We should be at the table with all discussions with our elected officials and the private sector about matters that govern or drive the mission of community action. How do you keep the community informed about key issues? Are you at the table providing the input when there are issues that concern our network? I think advocacy starts here. And we can't expect our local officials to do more than what we're doing. Denise, any thoughts, any comments?
Yeah, this is another one that really gets me excited. I love public policy and the advocacy role. And you're exactly right, Renee. Advocacy starts at the local level with the family in front of you. And this does call us to make sure that we're able to talk to our elected officials. And I still get a little freaked out when I talk to an elected official. That's a technical term, freaked out, because they must be special, right? They're just like you and me. They need to know a little. They need to know a lot about a lot of different things. And when you realize that you're the expert on issues that you're bringing to their table, they're going to listen to you, and they're going to hear you, hopefully. But again, that we can facilitate the communication of the families we work with their elected officials, whether that's through civic engagement training, bringing families to talk to the Public Utility Commission, especially in these times of utility shutoffs and moratoriums and increased need. There's a lot of ways that we, as community action folks, can help amplify that voice. So that's where I would land on that, Renee.
That is so true. And another important point is that it really forces us to become advocates. I mean, that's our role, that's what we do. And if we're working with children and families and communities and we're trying to help implement policies and governance for our constituents, this is where it starts. We're their voice. We have to form those relationships and those partnerships with our stakeholders and the decision makers, because those are the ones who are in those positions to make the decisions, but we've got to bring those to the table. Next slide, please. Conduct our organizational and operational duties with positive leadership, exemplified by open communication, creativity, dedication, and compassion. So here we see a slide, and I think we all know Sergeant Shriver, and we know the type of leadership that he exemplified during his time. And so today, I guess I want to talk a little bit about what type of leader are you? Are you exemplifying the positive leadership in your agencies that's needed in these challenging times? I think when we talk about leadership, there are so many different leadership styles. And I think if you've done research on leadership, you pretty much know the type of leadership that you have, the type of leader that you are. I went back and I kind of examined some of the types of leaderships, and I wanted to just kind of let you know about those. And maybe it would give you something to think about as you ponder the question about what type of leadership you exemplify in your organizations. Do you lead with fear and intimidation? Or do you encourage creativity, communication, and inclusiveness? Is your agency considered high performing? I looked at a couple of leadership styles, and one of those was the democratic leadership. The democratic leader, and we're talking about leadership styles and not political affiliations, but a democratic leader invites input from all sectors of the organization when making major changes. From the front line to the leadership team, the leader will ask for your input. And ultimately, the leader chooses how he's going to make that decision or the decision that will be made. On the other hand, there's a type of leadership that's called autocratic. And I think we can all kind of vision this type of leader. He's one that thinks, or she is one that thinks they know everything. There's no input. There's no involvement of any other staff. This leader rarely asks your opinion and makes all the decisions based on how he feels they should be made. So, and then there's the transformational leader who involves everybody, encourages participation, is the motivator, the cheerleader, the supporter, the person who brings everybody to the table and kind of wants to have this innovative, creative leadership. There are pluses and minuses or pros and cons of each type of leadership. But when you're thinking about positive leadership that makes a difference in our organizations, I think you have to examine yourself and decide, am I that type of leader that will motivate people to change, motivate people to do what we want them to do? Is there open communication and transparency? Are you leading with compassion? Or are you leading just by demands and barking out orders? And I think that's part of having an organization that's high performing. So think about how you lead, what you can do to make a difference, and that will resonate with the people who work with you. Denise, any other comments?
I think you've covered that range, and sometimes it depends on the day which kind of leadership style you're deploying on. But I think your transformational version sounds where we really want to land when we can. Yeah, thank you.
Great. So I guess the bottom line here is how you lead matters. Lead in a way that encourages participation, transparency, open communication, empathy, inclusion, and above all, fairness. Next slide, please. Exercise whatever discretionary authority we have under the law to promote the interest of the poor. This is one of my favorites. Of course, all of them are my favorites, but I do like this one because I look at the word exercise. And when you think about exercise, you know, you're thinking about something physical. But exercise can be defined as a process carried out for a specific purpose, especially one that's concerned with completing a specific task or area or skill. And so what we must do as community action agencies is to exercise our special talents to carry out whatever authority we have to promote the interests of the poor. One of the, when I learned about the ethics, and I must admit, I didn't know about the ethics until I went through the CCAP program. So I learned about this ethic through Charles, and Charles referred to this one as the meddling ethic. You know, you stir the pot, you meddle, you get involved, you jump in there. Sometimes you challenge the status quo. The work may not be something that you invite, or the way that you do what you do may not be something that's comfortable. It may not even necessarily be easy. But if you're down for the cause, sometimes you have to get in there and get a little dirty. Um, Community action is such a unique body. Our network has been around for 50 plus years. And sometimes people pretend they don't know who we are. We do great work. When people need us, we're there. People seek us out for a specific request. But overall, there's this notion of whose community, what do they do? So each year, every year, we have to justify and explain our existence. We have to explain to people about the important work we do in the community. And sometimes that's exhausting. But it's how you do it, and it's the passion that you have for the work that drives you doing this. So, you know, I think it's important that we meddle. I think it's important that we stir the pot in a legal way, of course. And we're the voice for those who can't speak. We're the voice for the disenfranchised, for the hopeless, the helpless. And so I think it's important sometimes that we use our creativity and our innovation in order to fight for those who can't fight. Denise?
I love that you call this the meddling one. It's such an apt description. So, as a community action leader, you know that the Community Services Block Grant is very flexible in its intent. It is meant to be decided at the local level. At times, there is sometimes direction put on local agencies about how you need to be using your CSBG dollars. Using your discretionary authority, though, the ability to meddle back is to push back and say, that's not the right purpose, or that's not the intent of these dollars. It's there to fight for the interests of people who are struggling in your community, that you as a local community action agency get to decide on where monies get spent. It might mean fighting at the, with the, not fighting, but addressing at the federal level, something, you know, presumptive eligibility, especially in these moments of COVID. That is there ways that you perhaps as a state office can work with discretionary authority that you have to allow for broad swaths of allowability? Where's the wiggle room? So there are opportunities at local, state office, state association, national folks to use that discretionary authority in creative ways to in the best interest of the families that you serve. And that's why this ethic, I agree with you, Renee. It's a good one. It's about stirring the pot, it's meddling, causing a little bit of good trouble there. So.
And it's funny that you mentioned that at the end, Denise. That was my last talking point on this. Because, you know, we think about competing organizations, limited funding, the need to have to justify what we do, and the fight that's in all of us who are passionate about this work. And so I think about the late Congressman John Lewis. Sometimes we have to get into a little good trouble in order to make a difference in the community, and especially to help those whom we serve.
Someone put in the Q&A window that their pastor fondly calls their organization nosy neighbors, which is needed, as they say.
It is. That's a good one.
Great.
Next slide, please. Lead the community action movement with respect, concern, courtesy, and responsiveness, recognizing that service to the poor is beyond service to oneself. That's a pretty strong statement. And we see our tagline, helping people, changing lives. I have that one at the end of my email, and I'm sure many of you do as well. But it's really about what we do, what we stand for, putting the needs of others above our own. And I think about community action really as a whole when I think about this particular ethic. It too kind of reminds me about how we lead, what we do to serve, how we show respect to others, the concern, the attention, the responsiveness to the issues that affect the poor. So it also leads me to think about the service that we render in our positions. Is community action just a job, or is it a calling? What do you feel about that? How do you feel that you're called to this movement, or were you just answering an ad for a job and it's here, and now that you're in it, you're just in it? I see someone said called. Yeah, I feel the same way, but it took a while to get there. It took a while. I answered a call for an ad, got the job, didn't know anything about community action, started the work, and after a while, it became a calling. I thought I'd stick around for 6 or 7 months, get some extra experience on my resume, and move on. But the work was so profound. It was so fulfilling, challenging at many times, but when you have the heart to serve, like Linda just put in the chat box, it makes a difference. And when it makes a difference, leading with respect, concern, courtesy, and responsiveness comes natural. And then you think about those people who you're serving. You want to make a difference. You want to help them to help themselves. And so you put their needs before your own. And in organizations, oftentimes that does not happen. I'd like to think that it does, but for instance, if there's weatherization services and you have an employee that has applied and they get served before one of the many people on your list, that's not really service to the poor beyond service to yourself. I think that's a little bit of selfishness. Or either bumping up people that you know on the Head Start list, putting their children in before someone who has those points that need to be in before that particular child. But we have to be mindful of the things that we do to show that we do put the poor beyond ourselves. Denise, any other comments?
I'm not sure I think probably the chat comes to the panelists, but I just so appreciate folks putting into the chat window that I took a job and now I've been here 28 years. It's made a difference in my own life. It started out as work, but I'm so thankful to be a part of it. So it's amazing. Someone 41 years later.
41 years, Tina Ray. Yes.
I tell you, I answered a newspaper
profound.
ad, yeah, in 1994 to go work at a CCAP, and I'm like, can I really get a job at the quintessential anti-poverty organization? And lo and behold, they hired me, and how lucky am I? But it's
it's service, and when you enjoy your work, it doesn't seem like work. I started in 1997, and again, did not plan to stick around, but here I am. And I think I'm right where I'm supposed to be doing the work that I'm doing right now, and I enjoy it. Next slide, please. Demonstrate the highest standards of personal integrity, truthfulness, honesty, and fortitude in all our community action activities in order to inspire confidence and trust in the community action movement. I like that one as well. I told y'all I had a couple of favorites, but all of them are good. I mean, this is some good stuff when you look at these ethical standards. But what I get from this is really representing yourself in the best possible professional light. Demonstrate personal integrity. Keep your word. Do what you say you're going to do. If you're advertising services that began May 5th, make sure May 5th you're prepared for the line of people who may show up at your agency. Truth and truthfulness, being sincere about helping others. And you know, that comes across when we have people who come to our offices for assistance. They can tell when you really want to help them. And so you have to be mindful of your expressions, the way you act, the way you talk. That is so very important. And then fortitude. I kind of wonder, well, why did they put that in there? But it's the moral strength. It's that strength in knowing that you're doing the right thing for the right reasons. And inspiring trust and having that trust and confidence. You know, we are entrusted with millions of dollars every day to carry out the functions of our agencies, to carry out those services and programs that the people in our communities need. And so if they can't see that we're doing that in the best way, being ethical, having some integrity, and showing that we are good stewards of that money, that's a problem. And I've heard that, you know, some people say, well, they help everybody else, but they've not helped me. They help themselves, they service their relatives, but I can't get any help. So make sure that your guidelines and your policies reflect the work that you're supposed to do and that you're doing it in the right way. People are watching. Your reputation, your personal reputation and that of the agency goes a long way. And anytime you violate that trust that people have put with you to do what you're supposed to do, that's a problem. Sometimes people wonder why, well, you know, we can't get any funding and, you know, we need to help people. But if you're a good steward with a little bit that you have and you do the right things and do it in the right way, the increase will come, the other opportunities will come. But we have to refrain from any acts of deceitment, any appearance of unfairness or biasness. And sometimes that's all it takes for someone to think that something like that has happened. So I would just say avoid anything that would cause a negative impact on your agency. And integrity is at the top of the list. Have some integrity. That's one of the main characteristics of a good leader, showing integrity. Denise?
Fortitude stands out to me right now in the midst of COVID. It is people who are attending today are tired. And knowing that you may be experiencing challenges in your own home, your family, there may be illness, may have had loved ones pass away. Getting up every day and going to work in community action, whether you're doing it from your kitchen table, whether you're doing it in a whole PPE suit, getting into the attic somewhere to install insulation, whether you're working remotely with a family in Head Start, whatever you're doing, we know it's tough. Community action professionals in this moment, you talk about a network who has stepped up, I'll put our network up against any. And this standard that talks about fortitude, we could also talk about truth to power in this one too, but right now in COVID, your fortitude is amazing, community action. And that's part of our code of ethics, is to remain solid when things are swirling around us.
Resilient.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If nothing else, community action professionals are resilient.
Yep.
Yes. Next slide, please. I think we're turning it over to you, Denise.
All right. We know that our agency boards need to sign conflict of interest forms, right? Why do we need to do that? You know, that's another thing we need to check off the box for. But look at here, right in our code of ethics, that we are looking to avoid all conflicts of interest. Certainly it's in the Head Start reauthorization bill, right? We have to document that we're avoiding all conflicts. The boards have to be independent. All that is incredibly important, because we also need to make sure that we are serving in such a way that we don't realize undue personal gain from the performance of our professional duties. Now, does this mean that we're all volunteers? No. The work you do every day, you earn your paycheck every day. Too many folks in community action are underpaid for the work that you are doing every day. But we need to make sure we're navigating carefully those potential conflicts of interest, who we're purchasing our services from. Renee mentioned earlier, who are we prioritizing on lists to get services? We need to make sure we're acting ethically. Ironically, we're talking about the code of ethics, but this one is kind of one of those standard code of ethics elements around avoiding conflicts of interest. Renee, what would you add to that?
Nothing, Denise. I think
we
you've
covered that one.
There. Yeah.
And I think it goes to the next slide as well. So let's go on to number 10 as well. Again, avoiding any interest or activity that's in conflict with the official conduct of official activities. At the partnership, I get a paycheck. If I were to go and speak to Renee's association and charge her an extra X number of dollars to go speak on behalf of community action, for me, that would be a conflict of interest. I already get paid to go do that. That's my job. And to try to take personal gain from that would be wrong. Are they always as easy to identify as that? No, but we do our best in community action to avoid conflicts of interest. So let's go to the next one.
Okay, I have this one. Respect and protect privileged information to which we have access in the course of official duties. I think it's self-explanatory. We cannot share personal information that we obtain from our clients. I don't know if there is any one specific federal law that protects all of our data sharing, but what comes to mind that most people would think about is the HIPAA laws, where we have to protect medical information. So in the same way, we have to protect the confidential information that our clients give to us when they're seeking services. And also just the personal information from staff members, personnel records, all of that stuff is off limits. And I think it's really a challenge sometimes, because most of the people that we serve in our communities are people that we know. It could be a neighbor, a church member, a friend of a friend. And sometimes in those conversations, we might forget that we're even sharing information just in conversating about people who come into the agency. So as a good practice, I think that's off limits. Leave those conversations in the workplace with the people who you need to share information with, and not outside. of the agency. Anything else, Denise?
I think you covered it.
Okay, next slide, please. Strive for professional excellence and encourage the professional development of our associates, including those seeking to become certified community action professionals. Okay, I love this picture. I'm on that picture. I'm in the front row. I'm the third person from my right. And I'm standing next to, I think that's Commissioner Dole. And on my left side of that picture is retired Commissioner Lois Carson. And I believe that was, and then the other people on that front row are my fellow commission members. And I think this was our very last in-person conference when we gathered. And looking back on that picture, it's one of my favorites. And yes, it's a favorite because I'm in it. But I felt so emotional being there in the midst of all of those people, and especially my fellow commissioners, and just being in the room and look at the class of people behind us holding their certificates that they had just walked across the stage to get. And it was just a moment for me. I really felt like I was getting my CCAP again. And I guess because I was standing there next to Lois, former Commissioner Lois, retired now, who was one of the founders of CCAP. And I just thought about all of that knowledge. And then on the other side, I saw Charles and my mentor. And I got a little emotional there. You know, it was a moment for me. And so when we talk about professional excellence and encouraging professional development, that's a biggie for me. And part of that is because of the work I do. I'm the project director for the state association in Alabama. So most of my work involves planning and implementing training and technical assistance. So I'm pretty big on training, but I'm even bigger on mentorship and coaching. And so I think if you've been in organizations for X numbers of years, you obtain all the certifications that you could possibly get. Your wall might be adorned with certificates and trophies, and you've reached that pinnacle. But what's sad about that is if you can't say that there's somebody that you've helped along the way. So I think we have a personal duty to reach down and bring those others up. That's the core of encouraging professional development and mentoring people and coaching people and helping them to develop their weaknesses and helping them to build on what you've established. I can remember in a study group, and Charles told us, you're the future. I'm expecting you all to carry the torch. And so I'm expecting a lot of you out there when we're long off the scene to carry the torch and help others to succeed professionally. Professional growth and development is paramount to having a high performing agency. And when there are programs like CCAP and others that will be discussed in the next couple of slides, I mean, that's the forefront of what we do. We have excellent training programs, and I encourage you all to take advantage of those. There's always something new to learn, and when you're helping others to learn and grow, all of the personal accolades, yeah, they mean a lot. They look good, they sound good on your resume, People, think about you for those accolades. But what would really be important for me is helping somebody else. Denise?
Thanks, Renee. And again, this standard, this part of the code talks about striving for professional excellence and encouraging professional development. So whether or not you're on the CCAP train or the Roma certification train or family development credential or your child development credential or your home inspector credential, whatever path you are on, our job is, for upholding this code of ethic, we are looking to encourage our colleagues for learning and growing. So I love this picture too. It's one of the best parts of our annual conferences when the CCAPs walk the stage. So, but let's go ahead on to the next slide. And I saw a question come in about what certificates were they holding, and that's actually the Certified Community Action Professional Certificate that was in the portfolio that folks earned, and we'll talk a little bit more about the CCAP process here in a moment. But I love this quote here from Jim Collins, who is the author of Good to Great. Greatness is not a function of circumstance. Greatness, it turns out, is largely a matter of conscious choice and discipline. Becoming a CCAP, becoming a certified Roma trainer, getting your CDL license, becoming a certified nurse practitioner, all those pieces take intentionality. They take focus, they take dedication, they take discipline. And living within the code of ethics, again, is that sense of being disciplined, that we are going to abide by this code wherever we're all human. We're all going to fail somewhere along the way. But having a code of ethics means we're going to try to live within that frame. And so let's go to the next slide and talk a little bit about intentional professional development in community action. We like to call this the trifecta of leadership development. Many folks start off getting your certified Roma trainer or Roma implementer certification. Becoming a Roma trainer or Roma professional, allows you to get grounded in outcomes versus outputs. It gets you grounded in the Roma process of assessing needs, developing programs, deploying services, doing good data collection and good data analysis. It's a good solid piece of the work. We'll talk here more about CCAP, Certified Community Action Professional, and then becoming a Pathways peer reviewer or peer implementer, which gets to organizational development. That's a pathway toward becoming a community action leader. Not the only pathway, just a pathway. Let's go to the next slide. And the next slide, and I am a little conscious on time here a little bit, but these are the three, again, not definitive, but these are three options for community action folks to consider. And we'll talk again more about CCAP here, where we talk about the history of community action, demonstrating experience, and showing good leadership and good management. And again, the code of ethics are a piece of the CCAP process. Let's go to the next slide, please. And so I'm going to turn this back over to Renee. Having done those three components, each of them has their own unique lift. Roma is a big lift. Pathways to Excellence is a big lift, and CCAP is a big lift. But I will say I have my CCAP pin sitting right here by my computer. It was a life-changing, career-changing opportunity for me. And I encourage you, if you're considering it, let us know. We'd love to see you engage in our CCAP program. Renee, you want to talk a little bit about this as a commissioner?
Sure. So I have my CCAP. I'm wearing my CCAP pin, see? Okay. And these are just some of the benefits of becoming a certified professional, community action professional, CCAP. It gives you the recognition you deserve for your accomplishments in the field. It tells others you have achieved a nationally recognized standard for professionalism in community action. It enhances the credentials of community action staff at the agency, and it provides an edge in competing for public and private grant funds. It improves your professional markability when competing for higher positions in your own agency or another community action agency. All of these things are really the things that I think drove me to seek getting my CCAP. And it has been an awesome experience. My journey started in 2012, went to a conference in New York, and I decided that I was going to meet Mr. Charles McCann and talk about getting my CCAP. And little did I know another colleague had the same idea. So we started on this path from August of 2012 until the next year of going through the process. And if you go to the next slide, this is the process that you go through to become a CCAP. First of all, you make application, you sign the code of ethics, what we've talked about. There's a candidate data form that you fill out. It's due the third Wednesday in January. And you submit an executive skills portfolio by the third Wednesday in February, which is a special project that you have a leadership role in producing or that you have pretty much managed and produced on your own. There's an exam. If you score enough points from the CDF and the ESP, and then you qualify to sit for the exam. And upon passing that exam, you walk across the stage like those people did in the previous slide that we saw. So when I walked across the stage on that very fast pace from 2012 to 2013, it was an awesome experience. And I encourage everyone to take advantage of this. The opportunities that it has presented for me have been incredible. I probably wouldn't be here today had it not for becoming a CCAP. And because of that passion, dedication, and commitment to that process, I became a volunteer scorer for the CDFs, the candidate data form, and the ESPs. And from there, I was tapped to serve on what we call the Junior Certification Board. And upon completion of that service, I was appointed as a CCAP commissioner. And it has been an awesome, awesome experience for me. Whenever I talk about CCAP, it's just passion. I'm just thrilled beyond words to tell you how rewarding and fulfilling this process has been. And I know it would be the same for you if you take advantage of going through this process. In Alabama, when my colleague Andre Taylor and I went through, we were the first two from the state of Alabama. And that was a great, great honor. I mean, the first two in Alabama, but it was fulfilling and gratifying. But what has really been a plus is seeing and helping others to become certified. Shortly after we were certified, we gained two others, and the following year we gained one, and we just kind of went stagnant for a while. And last year we had 4 additional ones. Charles McCann has been conducting our study groups. And so for me, when we went through, we had to travel to Kentucky each month to join the Kentucky study group. Because if we wanted to become CCAPs, we thought we had to learn from the best. And so we went through that process with Charles. But now we have the beauty of Charles conducting those sessions virtually. And the participation has been great and phenomenal. And at the association, I've been able to provide resources to pay for our people who are going through CCAP. And that's a plus, an extra benefit for our agencies. And I'm very pleased to say that our new director has embraced the things that I'm trying to do in the state. And so additionally, one last thing, and I'll turn it back over to Denise. Through my service, I was appointed to serve on the exam committee for CCAP, which is a huge responsibility. I, along with Commissioner Tani from Kansas City and Mary Beth from NASCAS, and Jim Lepresti, who is our consultant. We meet each year to discuss and plan the exam for the following year. And it is a process, but I'm glad to be a part of that process because we all bring some unique talents to the table. And I always say that we're there to make sure that the exam is fair, impartial, and it's an exam that anyone can pass if you've studied hard and applied yourself. And so there is the part about equity that's really important. And overall, I'm just very, very happy with my involvement in CCAP. And I challenge you guys who are not actively thinking about becoming a CCAP, get involved. The application is on the website, and it would be an experience that would change your whole perspective on community action. Thank you, Denise.
Thank you, Renee. And I too would not be sitting where I'm sitting without having done the CCAP. I would bet dollars to donuts on that. So, and saw a few folks in the chat talking about how they were part of the first class in Tennessee. Someone is currently studying with Charles McCann and finding him so inspiring. I will say the picture on the screen is the 6 of us in New York who went through it together a number of years ago, and all 6 of us are still in community action. And 2 of us in that picture are now at the national office. I'm there with Aaron Wicks, who was our vice president for organizational capacity building as well. And those smiles on our faces carry to this day when we think about CCAP. So next slide, please. So you're like, Denise, I'm good on the CCAP thing, or I've done CCAP, or maybe not this year, but what else can I do? Where else should I be spending some of my time, talent, and treasure to do some leadership development? I'm going to show you on both this slide and the next one. I have some tools and resources and books. I'm a big reader. I hope that you are reading as well. The one in the middle is the history of community action. I believe that's also available up on our website, written by Jim Masters. It was written a number of years ago at various points in our anniversary. Those are the various historical logos for community action and Head Start and other programs. The book on the left is actually a textbook that's used in leadership. I believe it was written by Delitzo Silamoyo, who is on the partnership's board of directors. He's also the executive director of the Regional Planning Commission in Urbana-Champaign, Illinois. Used to be at the State Association. He wrote this textbook along with colleagues about leadership using community action at its foundation. Maximum Feasible Success, I think it's Googleable. It's an older text, but it by Robert Clark really gives you the foundational history of community action. And again, maximum feasible participation, but I love this frame, maximum feasible success. The next slide, please. Again, there are always books that you can pick up, that you can read. These are some of the ones that I would recommend. I have taken away things from each of these books that will stay with me, whether it's The Forgotten Americans by Isabel Sawhill, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Dr. Kendi. The Color of Law talks about the historical racial bias built into our housing system from day one, structural racism built into the sauce of our housing policy. And $2 a Day talks about the fallacy of welfare in our country, and that TANF is not certainly meeting the needs of families, and that families are living in many cases on very little cash coming into their households. So these are some really great resources to put on your bookshelf, but more importantly, to read and digest and to have them in your toolbox in your memory bank. So finally, let's go to the next slide. Renee has been very gracious with her time being part of this webinar here today. So appreciate you, Renee, and all the work you're doing with the CCAP Commission. Both of us are willing to answer questions if you have them. I haven't seen other questions come in through the chat, but the code of ethics, we may want to take a refresh look, Renee. I think maybe we'll talk to the commission a little bit about this, the partnerships board. They're grounded in everything we're doing. I'm just wondering, perhaps it could be refreshed a little bit. We'll have to think a little bit about that. They were written in the early 90s. I think the foundational elements still carry through to today. But I would welcome your thoughts on the code today and how do we want to think about moving forward as a network?
I totally agree that we need to take a look at these, especially given the climate of today. And what I would like to see is something related to racial equality implemented in the standards today. We had several racial incidents over the summer, and I think it warrants some discussion in relation to the ethics. And I would be glad to, take a look at those along with my fellow commissioners and see how we can update, but still keep those same standards that are so important to community action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can see racial equity built into the sauce, but being a bit more explicit about it, I think there's some benefit to that, and certainly maybe refreshing some of the language with today's thinking about how we talk about poverty and family well-being in America. So we know that this year's CCAP class, just as those of you who are in the midst of CCAP or you're thinking about CCAP, one thing that we do want to put in the back of your mind is to keep in mind the code of ethics as you prepare for the exam. There are mnemonics that I've had people, they remember the first letter of each of the pieces of the code of ethics, so that will trigger their memory. I think it is good incumbent upon folks going through CCAP to read through the code of ethics. Maybe watch this webinar again the closer you get to your exam, because there will be usually elements of the code of ethics in the exam for CCAP. What else would you add to that, Renee?
Well, since I'm on the exam committee, I can't really talk a lot about the exam, but certainly it's no secret that there are questions related to the ethics on the exam. And I guess to close out in my comments, I just challenge each of you to practice those ethics. We may not do all of those things every day, but I think if you take a look at what you can do to make your staff and to make yourself more familiar with those ethics, I think it can help us to avoid a lot of things, unnecessary things. And I like to think about, if you're pondering a decision, and you've got to second guess, ask yourself over and over, should I do it, should I not? Then probably you shouldn't do it. Another rule of thumb is, if it's something that you'd be embarrassed about to see on the news at 6 p.m. or 10 p.m., then no, you shouldn't do it. And my final thought on that is, just picture yourself skating on a lake of ice. And there are warning signs that said, do not go beyond this point. And you're skating and skating, and things seem pretty well, and you venture out a little bit and go beyond those signs. And things are a little rocky, but you say, okay, it's still pretty good. And you keep skating and skating until finally you get to a point where the ice is cracking, it's breaking. You're no longer on solid ground. And there's no way to reel yourself back in, or for someone else to reel you back in. And at that point, it's too late. So think about that in terms of your ethical decisions. And I'd just like to say I really appreciate Denise and the partnership asking me to do the webinar. It's been a pleasure. I'd like to thank my folks from Alabama who are tuned in. And I thank you all for just indulging me to do the webinar today. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. And yes, does it pass the smell test is usually the right question in my mind. Do I want to read about it on the front page of the paper when I'm trying to make a decision? I'll also recognize and own up I've screwed up right? We're all human. All we can do is strive to do the best we can and make the best decision in the moments we can with the information we have at that moment in time. So keep your eye on the ball, community action. Thanks for all you do. We're here if you have questions or comments. Don't hesitate to email us, reach out. And we hope to see you in Boston in August at our live event. If we have to go virtual, we will, but right now we are set for August 30 through September 3rd in Boston. And don't forget early February, that first week, our virtual conference with Dr. Kendi and Dr. Christopher as our headline keynoters. So thank you for all you do. Do your best out there. Keep that fortitude centered. You do the right thing every day, community action. We get to look in the mirror and realize that we get to spend our careers helping families, helping people, changing lives. Thanks for all you do, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.